Democratic candidate for Texas House District 70, and I'll be your moderator tonight for the first part, as Gavin said, of our crucial conversation, as I like to call it. I want to start by sharing that following George Floyd's horrific murder, because that's what it was, murder, I was horrified to the point where I couldn't even watch the video. And I began processing that and realized after some days that I truly have been, as a woman, a white woman of privilege, I have been complacent and complicit in the propagation of racism in our country. And I felt like it was time that we really started some serious conversation, and who better to help me with that than some of my Black American friends. And so I called upon these three particular people today because I know you all have a lot to share, and you have experiences that I think will be very valuable in enlightening all of us. And I began thinking about where we've been protesting, we've been marching, we've been having some conversation, but what's next? Where do we go from here? Because a lot has been happening, emotions are high, but what happens next? So that's where you all come in, and I thought we'd start by delving into some of your background and set the table to begin some of those conversations. So let me introduce our guests without any further ado. First is Miss Denise Harrington, who has been a friend of mine for 20 plus years. Denise is joining us from Maryland tonight and is the founder and CEO of DMH Consulting, a premier communications company which offers the highly regarded Speaking with Impact and Leading with Impact programs. And then I have Frederick Nickens. Frederick, do you want to wave? Who joins us from right here in Collin County. He's a New York native, but served in the United States Army for 23 years as Armor First Sergeant. He currently teaches 8th grade pre-AP and United States history at Hayes Middle School in Prosper, Texas, and is an active member of the Collin County NAACP. And Dave Sims, Dave, is joining us from New York this evening. Dave is a fellow Bethany College graduate, and he's in his 14th year as the TV voice of the Seattle Mariners. Dave was named the 2018 and 19 Washington State Sportscaster of the Year by the National Sports Media Association. That's quite an honor. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, Denise, I'm going to start with you this evening. We, as I said, have been friends for 20 plus years. We've known each other. We've been vacationed together, remember? And yet, we have never had any crucial conversation about any of the injustices that you may have suffered as a Black woman. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a vulnerable experience for both people. But I will speak from the African-American space first, because it's important for people to understand how we feel. The reason I met Angie is because the father of her children actually brought me into a major corporation, and everywhere he went, every corporation that he went to, he took me. He had called me a trusted advisor and gave me opportunities that I probably wouldn't have had. So we had a chance to do a lot of things together, to play golf together. I'll never forget that. Reason I know it's 20 years because I was actually probably in my 8th or 9th month of pregnancy and was out on the golf course with her in unbelievable heat. So I do remember it was probably 20 years ago. But the funny thing about vulnerability, I just spoke with another woman, Black woman, executive at a major corporation. She just retired and is a consultant. And she talked about all the time she was sitting at the table and could see things and wanted to say things and just frankly got tired of being the one that spoke up and said, and just being in that position of having to feel vulnerable and weighing the risk of speaking up against her corporate life. And we already come in as African Americans not at the top of the totem pole. We all know who's at the top of the totem pole. It's white men. So you have to weigh whether or not in a corporate environment you're going to say something or not. So there's always a little bit of a holdback, even if you have someone you trust, like, trusting you. But generally speaking, one of the major reasons why we don't say anything on either side is because we know how vulnerable it is. Now, I can't speak from the white perspective of why you don't speak up. But I can speak from the Black perspective is there's a lot at risk. A lot at risk in
Sure.
speaking,
That makes sense. And I will speak to that just briefly, but I'd like to ask Dave, are you able to have those kinds of conversations with any of your white friends?
Very seldom. Piece I wrote the other day in the Seattle Times that appeared online Friday night, appeared in the paper Saturday. It was interesting. I'm in an interracial marriage, and my wife said, you need to say something about the whole George Floyd thing. And, I'm more than, as I said in the piece, I think I'm multidimensional. It's not just stick to sports. And it just so happened that the Seattle Times called me and I got to write the piece. I got to say my piece. And the reaction has been tremendous. The fact that you reached out, I think that was certainly a generator. And we just had 3 days of conversation with the Mariner Ball Club about how they want to turn things around. It is not easy to have this conversation. It is, from a Black person's, probably from my Black person's perspective, it could get incendiary from both sides for sure. And I think that's probably why most people stay away from it, or maybe not, are reluctant to go there. And it's one of those things that if you have a decent, friendly relationship, you could be pulling a pin on the grenade on it by doing that. But you know what? Given what has just happened, given how everybody's nerves have been just rubbed and just scalded raw, screw it. Let's do it now, man. Let's talk about this stuff. It's time. I mean, everybody saw that. The entire world saw it. The whole world is upset about it. They're demonstrating in every capital in the world. This is probably the time. And with all due respect to the people who previously were killed by policemen before George Floyd last week, a couple weeks ago.
Okay, great. What about you, Frederick? Have you had this kind of conversation with your white friends?
In the military, my 23 years in the military, you try to, you want to. But I agree with Miss Denise when she talks about that whole survival mode. You like, well, if I say this, it's going to come back and I'm not going to get promoted or I may not have a job. And now in the education setting, I see the same thing where I'm in a room and, and I'm here in Texas and people have said things or I really want to express myself. So I really have to, you have to choose your words wisely. And because, okay, I don't want to be labeled as the angry Black man or the angry Black woman. You don't want that label because you're already the minority in the room in most cases in the settings that we're in. So you don't want to be the one that goes, wow, there's that guy. Here he comes, that angry Black man. He's just gonna disagree with everything we say. And what you're saying may be the most logical thing in the room, but you have to figure out what to say. And here's the problem, I think, is we as Black people know white people's world. We understand your world. We're taught your world early on. We know it. You don't know ours. So you may not understand the place and the space that I'm coming from when I speak because you don't know me. And that's the problem. I agree with Mr. Dave. Let's take off the gloves and let's stop kicking the can down the road and let's pick it up and do something with it.
So this is really part of our solution going forward. And what you both all are saying reminds me of Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, because he talks about that book. He talks about how important it is to, when you're talking to people you don't know well, you're coming up from a place of, we don't know your history. We don't know your life. We don't know the context, right, that you're coming from. And to your point, I think, wow, I never thought about that. But yes, we don't know what it's like to just, I'm going to say, live Black, right? So I totally get that now that you've said that. Thank you for sharing that, all of you. Denise, Stacey Abrams, I heard her say recently that the white culture is swimming with the current, but the Black culture is constantly swimming against the current. And it's a struggle, right? Beyond what we should have to endure, I think. But as a Black woman, you've already said you realize that the white male is at the top of the hierarchy. Did you feel that there was always a higher bar that you had to strive for, particularly as a Black woman? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Well, it's amazing. At the very top is the white male. And next to the white male is white woman. Now, that's a whole nother conversation. Next to that, I have had friends who have gone back and forth with me about this, Black friends. I feel next to that is Black woman. So Black, white male, you got white woman, Black woman, then Black male. And the reason why I say that is in my business and I've been training people for what, 30 years. I started in San Francisco, which is where I met Ken Beto, or actually in Portland, Oregon, which is another story in terms of how many white people are in that city. But the thing that I noticed during that time is that I was training all these white men. I usually, in my training classes, whether with my company or I started out with another company, there were no Black men. And I was rare as a Black woman telling white men what to do. That was interesting all by itself. But the fact that there were no Black men, and I trained these white men who literally didn't have anything over any Black man that I knew, but Black men weren't at the table in these at the time I was in the tech industry teaching communication skills in the tech industry, and still do. It was amazing to just watch, and I'm training them to do these things and to sell and look, but there's no Black men. And it wasn't until probably, 3, 4, 5 years ago, maybe, that I started seeing maybe one Black man in selling and technology. Woohoo, one. One.
Wow.
And I always was the one in the room, always. Now, the beauty of it is I did have mentors that were white males that had supported me to move my business forward. And I learned to take advantage of the fact that I was the only one in the room. Just take advantage of the fact. But I never for a minute let them, at least in my mind, be a problem or an issue or a victim of being a Black person. I just went in and did my job. Now, if I found an opening, which I could say, you know what, I'm bringing to the table something here. I'm bringing my skin tone. I'm bringing a Black woman, and I'm bringing a Black person first, and then I'm bringing a woman second. You ought to be lucky that I'm showing up. So I did have those conversations from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective, and I have a lot of white friends. we just didn't go there. I mean, we would talk about, you know, certain things about race. You know, I have girlfriends that are white and blonde, and I would tell her, you're white and blonde and you're going to get better contracts than me. And the truth of the matter is, to this day, she has. And I do the exact same thing she does, and been doing it longer. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Did you, Dave, have a role model when you were coming up in the world of broadcasting? And what obstacles did you feel you had to overcome that were extraordinary?
Generally, you don't see many. Matter of fact, when I was growing up, I didn't see any black sportscasters till I was probably in high school. When Bill White retired as a player and became a broadcaster in Philly, where I grew up, he was the first black guy I saw do broadcasting. Anybody else that I admired in my formative years were white guys. And but that didn't. You know, I knew I wanted to do this. I knew I had the ability and the guts to stay with it. But in terms of, you know, to answer your question, he's the only one. And then once I got into the business, I got to meet, you know, former athletes who turned into broadcasters, learned a lot from them, learned a lot from pretty much everybody. But in terms of one black role model in broadcasting or sports writing, no. And I'm in position now, and I've been at this for a long time, both as a sports writer, talk show host, sports anchor, play-by-play guy. I mean, I'm hearing from black kids, white kids who've seen me in my various roles over the years in Philly, New York, and Seattle, and nationally, that, you know, they send me tapes of critique, they ask me questions, that kind of stuff. So I find that I'm the answer to your question for some other people. In terms of one black person, you know, I know Bill White now, and he's retired. He's been 85 years old, still going great. He would probably be, and that was late, you know, like I said, late in high school that I you know, saw him at work and doing what I do now.
Do you think, and I'm going to ask you this too in a minute, Frederick, did you have some kind of extra grit, or what do you feel you brought to the table yourself that helped you be successful?
Well, I like to think I'm a people person. I think I bring big enthusiasm if you listen to any of my broadcasts. And I stayed with it. I didn't get this baseball job until I was about 54. And I had been applying for jobs for 15, 20 years before that and couldn't get arrested. And that's no bad word choice, but you know what I'm saying. And it's a non-traditional, it's a non-traditional role to see, you know, a black guy in a lead broadcasting position. That's why there's so few of us. And we've got some great guys out there who have been working over the last few years. I think Brian Gumbel set the tone. His brother Greg's been outstanding. I mean, I can name a whole bunch of other guys. And thank God that has changed over the years. But a very non-traditional position for a black guy. And the other thing too, I was lucky. I had both parents, and their ideas. You know what? Go for it. What do you got to lose? And I think everybody, I think Frederick and Denise, you'll attest to this. Got to work sometimes twice as hard just to keep even, and 4 times as hard to be, you know, to get ahead of the pack, to get them to notice you. And I think one of the traits that has worked well for me is perseverance.
That's what I was wondering. What about you, Frederick? Who was your role model? I know you were in the service, obviously, but as a how did you become a teacher, and what would you tell your Black American students as far as what they need to do to be successful, in life?
Well, the reason why I became an educator is, and I shared this with you before, Angie. When I was in 2nd grade, I was bused into a white school neighborhood in the same district in which I lived, but the school was on the other side of town. And I was the only lottery I've actually ever won in my life. It was a lottery, and I got picked, and I went to this school. And I asked my mom, and I said, why do I have to go leave my friends and go to this school? Because there was only 60 of us that had gotten picked and selected to go to this school. So I asked my mom why, and she said, when you get older, I'll explain it to you. So 5th grade comes around, and I ask her, okay, I'm older, explain it to me. And she explains to me, why I went there, the better education. And sadly, I did get an education. So I told my mom when I was in the 5th grade, I would become a teacher because I didn't want any kid to ever have to leave his neighborhood to go get education, to leave his friends. They should get a quality education no matter where they live, no matter what their zip code is. So that's why I became an educator. And as far as role models in the education world, there's a few. In my first teaching job, I was down south of Dallas, in a Black district, and I learned a lot. And then I realized I didn't like teaching elementary school, so the only middle school job I could get would be further north. So I went up there. But what I would tell any Black student is, first of all, you're more than just an athlete. You have worth. I tell Black girls, you're queens. Don't ever let anyone put you down because your hair or skin tone is different. I tell young Black boys, you can use your head. There's, for every guy that makes on the court, for every LeBron James, there's a guy like Mr. Sims that's behind there with a longer career than a LeBron James, doing a whole lot more for his community. Don't shun those jobs, because here's the reason. No one's going to show you those positions because they don't want you to have them. They want you to be the showpiece. They want you to be the entertainer because they know that lifespan is not long. And you got to think, our kids in our neighborhoods look at these millionaires, basketball players, but the millionaires are being paid by the billionaires who are the owners. That's who you should strive to be, that owner, not that player. That's what you want to be. You want to be writing the checks, not receiving the checks. And we don't, like and I don't think we emphasize that enough, because why? Because think about it. In the NFL, 0 Black owners.
Yeah.
0. Like, you can't, that's a number that stands out. 0. Look at, in basketball, what? 1.5, Michael Jordan, and then there's a couple minority owners and a couple other teams. But why? Because we don't tell our kids to aspire for those positions. So, like when I was in the Army, my first mentor in the Army, I thought was my first platoon sergeant, and I loved him to death. He was a great guy, white guy, very strong. Until I was in Germany, I was 19 years old, and I didn't know I was getting promoted that day. So I'm out there, first sergeant calls me up, I put on my new rank, I'm smiling, I'm happy, and everyone's shaking my hand, and these 2 Black sergeants stayed afterwards. And they read me the riot act because my uniform was wrinkled. And I was like, whoa, I thought you guys were going to hug me, be happy for me. And they told me, like Mr. Dave said, we got to be twice as good all the time. All the time. So at that moment, what I did was I found everybody in the company that was the best at what they did. And I literally went up to them. I didn't care what color you were or whatever. And I studied you. And I asked you questions. And I wrote it down. And I wanted to become better than you. And that's how I became better than you. So like when I walk in a room, I size up the competition. And I go stand next to the person who I think is my competition. That's the person I'm going to stand next to. I'm not going to stand across the room. I'm going to stand right next to you because I want to see everything you do. I want to see the person that they say is the best thing since sliced bread. I want to be next to you because I want to be better than you, because I have to be better than you, because there are more eyes looking at me. I was going to take a teaching position in a Black district a couple years ago, and my wife sat me down and she said, don't. Because I was offered a position in a white school. And I was like, but, Black kids need to see me. They need to see me in my shirt and my tie, and they need to see me out there. And she said, there's Black kids in those white schools that need to see you even more. Because we're already pouring enough Black people into those Black districts. We're not pouring Black people into the white districts.
Yeah, that's a really good comment. Thank you for sharing that. So we have a lot to get through. And so I want to move on to what I think is a really important topic, tough topic. Do you all have children? You all have sons. Have you had the talk with your children? And how do you even begin to juxtapose this message of the police are supposed to be for our neighborhood safety, for your safety, but yet, no, you need to be fearful to some degree or behave a certain way. How do you share that message with them, and what is that talk like? Do any of you want to go first in that?
Well, I kind of want to go first because Frederick just talked and I need to talk.
Okay.
Here's the thing. There is a thread going through this whole conversation that leads to this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, you wanted us to lay it out there, so let's get to it. We don't have time anymore to mess around with this topic. I believe the father, mother of systemic racism is white privilege. It's the reason why Frederick has to work twice as hard to get the same job as someone who rolled out of bed. I'm not trying to offend anybody, and so nobody get offended out there, but he has to work twice as hard to get a job that someone who may not even have his experience and certainly didn't work as hard as he did. That's from white privilege. And one of the things that people tell you all the time is, well, we can't find white people. Well, where are you looking? And that's why it's important for our white friends now to have these conversations, because you haven't been talking to us. Because if you had, you would know that the person who's qualified is sitting right next to you, or they know someone who's sitting next to you. But the most important thing to understand is white privilege means this. It's not a money thing. White privilege means you wake up in the morning white, and you have a leg up that we don't have. And everyone in your world expects you to win. Nobody in your world, well, I shouldn't say nobody, most people, just because they're blinded by white privilege, they don't expect or don't seek or don't look beyond their white privilege to see into our world. That's why Frederick said, nobody's asked me, nobody talked to me. You've got to really be honest, because the truth is Black people can't solve this one. You have to solve it. You have to be the one involved. And before you jump in, Angie, I have to say one more thing, because it goes with this line of thinking. As much as the killing, the murder of George Floyd hurt me to my heart, especially, my girlfriend called me up that night and said, do you know the last thing that came out of his mouth is he called for his mother? Do you know how much that hurt as a Black mother? Because if that was my child, I don't know how I could live beyond that. And thank God that his mother had already proceeded and brought him in. But the other thing that really got to me was watching that white woman in Central Park doing exactly to that Black man who all he was doing was watching birds. And he was a graduate of Harvard. So that goes to show you that the same Harvard degree that a white man would have is not valued that a Black man has. So, because by its definition, he went to Harvard, he should have been privileged. But no, and without even second thinking, she picked up that phone, and if it had been when Emmett Till had been killed, it would have been, he raped me. But she knew, and that's the thing that got me that day, is that you made that decision to hurt this man. He wasn't even doing anything to you because you knew you could. And that's the stuff we've got to start dealing with. That's what I called every white girlfriend I had and said, it's your job, get it done. Because I'm not going to answer it for you anymore. I'm not going to be your token anymore. If you want to be my friend, get this job done. Because
so how do we do that job? How do we start that job?
Well, you're doing it right now by giving us a platform to speak. And you're also doing it by being honest about what your feelings are around it, that I don't know this, I don't know that. So that's a place to start. The second place to go is start educating yourself. I was lucky. I didn't get bussed into any school because I grew up in Washington, D.C. And in those days, Washington, D.C. was 85% Black. So all that Black history that you all are starting to learn about, it was drilled into our heads. by Black teachers and Black doctors and DC was a professional Black town. And we just knew from day one who we were. And our teachers, just like Frederick's, you gotta polish those shoes. Don't come up in here with those shoes that aren't polished, because, you had to be better. But being better didn't necessarily guarantee opportunity for us.
Did you know that as a child, or when did you realize that?
Well, as a child, because you get taught. You get taught about racism as a Black child. You get taught about racism. And that's where the talk came from. The talk is for not just Black men, but mostly for Black women, because they're the ones that get victimized, as, I'm being nice, I guess, victimized the most. But Black women too, we do too. We have to be careful about the way we go out and the way and how we get involved and all that stuff. So I asked a group of my white friends the day after this all hit. I said, okay, because someone said, well, I don't know what to do. I said, well, the bottom line is, have you ever had this conversation of 10 and 2? Nothing. Nobody spoke. They didn't know what 10 and 2 was. And for those of you who are listening, 10 and 2 is when you get stopped by the police office, you put one hand at 10 o'clock and one hand at 2 o'clock, and you don't move them. And if they ask you for your driver's license, you say, it's in my glove compartment, may I get it, please? But that still doesn't guarantee you life. You've polished those shoes like Frederick did, but it still doesn't guarantee you a job that's better. And that's systemic racism. That's what it is. So you have to look at your privilege. The privilege is I wake up with opportunity that this person next to me who may be Black doesn't get. And what can I do to change it? And I think the reason why this is so important right now is because people are seeing that more white people are involved this time, and that the possibility of change is there. But face the fact that you're privileged, accept it. You can apologize to Black people, and don't expect us to want to talk about it, really, because some of that stuff brings up trauma for us. And that trauma hurts.
You mentioned that, Denise, because I got emails and texts from young white guys who I've mentored, and, hey man, I'm really sorry for what happened. If there's anything I can do or say, you let me know. I just said, hey, much appreciated. Thank you. But I think the fact that you're aware of it now, you're on the right path.
So are you saying, let me make sure I'm understanding you. Awareness is the first step.
Well, awareness of what Denise was just talking about.
Yeah.
You just got to keep your eyes open, and in your own workplace. If you see, qualified Black people getting passed over on a consistent basis, and if you've seen it during the course of your life, and if you talk to Black people about what's going on and with them, you'll be told. I can tell you that right now. You're asking originally about the talk. I think one of the moments that jumps out at me with I had two sons in their 30s, but I remember, I think the oldest was probably 17, 18, and we live here in Manhattan. And he did some homework, and he had a long day, and he wanted to just blow off some steam. So it's like 10 o'clock. He's putting his hoodie on. He's getting ready to walk. I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going for a run." I said, "Dude, really? You're gonna go for a run? A Black guy going for a run in Manhattan at 10 o'clock at night? It doesn't even sound good, let alone look good. And it's gonna look suspicious. We're considered dangerous and suspicious when we walk into an office. If you're new, particularly if you're new, but considered dangerous and suspicious just walking around here. But don't go there. So you add that to what Denise was talking about, 10 and 2. There's certain things, I have stories that I just heard from recently retired American Black ball players about, they got a luxury car. They're driving in a neighborhood, a non-traditional neighborhood, where Black guys maybe not be seen. And of course, the cops flag them down. "What are you doing there?" "Dude, I live here." Torrey Hunter had a cop draw a gun on his home. Torrey Hunter was a great ball player. Comes home one night, his alarm goes off. He turns it off, goes down, watches TV. An hour later, a couple of cops ring the doorbell. young cop, an old cop. The old cop has his gun drawn. It's like, hey, what's up, fellas? Hey, let me see your ID. He said, I live here. This is my home. Long story short, walk him upstairs. He shows him his ID, and the younger cop says, I knew you. You played for the Angels. The cop with the gun said, oh, I'm sorry, man. Hey, can I get a couple of tickets? Really? I mean, really?
Yeah, that's crazy. So I want to go back to Denise's comment about the systemic racism, because that was one of my topics I was getting to. Definitely, it's so important. But Dave, in the article, the piece you wrote the other day for the Seattle Times, you said, I enjoy a certain amount of celebrity as a sportscaster, but when I walk down the street, I'm still just a Black man. And so I thought that was such an example of the systemic racism. And I heard a young guy on Sunday say these words. We were at a protest, a march, and this young Black man who organized it said this. He said, we have to learn that not all cops are bad, but we also have to learn that not all Black men are criminals.
Correct.
And that, I think, is an example of the systemic ideology that we have all come to understand and perhaps more importantly, or sadly, embrace.
Oh, no question about it. And, how many times I've seen people, I'm a double clutch their purse when I get in an elevator. How many times have I been followed walking in the drugstore? I'm looking for some nasal spray or something for my allergy. Some guy's following me, checking me. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Yeah, I mean, it's out there. And I know when you emailed me, you said, the celebrity's not going to even get me on the subway. So, and like a couple of anecdotes I've seen over the years, I leave the ballpark. And, we have a lot of cops and sheriffs and policemen there to guard, fans and keep everything safe. But, I could pull out of the parking lot and run into another guy and, my windshield wiper or something is off and he just wants to be a badass that night and pick on me. And, then we got an issue. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Frederick, how does education, or what role could education play in addressing the systemic racist ideology that we have grown so accustomed to?
It's the key. It's the key. It's literally the key. Like I said before, we know their world, they don't know ours. So in order for this, just think about it. In the state of Texas here, they just passed a curriculum change basically to allow African American history to be taught in schools. But one small problem: it's optional. School districts can opt in to teach it or not. That's the flaw. And I understand, and I understand politics. That was the way to get the ball over the goal line, to say, well, we're going to do this, but we're not going to make it mandatory. We're not going to shove it down their throats. No, you have to shove it down their throats. You have to, like Mr. Dave said, you have to make people uncomfortable. And to make them uncomfortable, sometimes you have to force feed them. And it starts with education. If we start in the school system, we can change a generational mindset. Every time I deploy, I used to tell my soldiers, look, it takes 5 generations to change your mindset. So if each one of us changes one person, we did our job, literally. In 365 days, if we can change the mindset of one person. So if we can reach a student in the 9th grade and teach them about another culture, and they truly understand it, we just taught a generation, because that student eventually is going to have children. And then their children are going to learn that inclusiveness counts. But as long as we keep acting like, well, we're going to do this and we're going to whitewash it, and I hate to say that, but we're going to put it on the surface, but we're not going to dig deep, and we're not going to make you feel uncomfortable, we're never, ever, ever going to change. And as far as the talk, there's no talk in my mind. It's every day's the talk. Survival. 2 years ago, I was stopped in Plano, daytime on my way to work. Funny story. The police officer thought I was absolutely out of my mind. So I had my hands at 10 and 2. That's what we're taught to do. And everything was yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Sir, I'm going to take my right hand and reach over to my glove compartment. And he looked at me, he had his camera on, and he looked at me, and he was looking at me in an odd way, like something's wrong with this guy. Because I was saying in a very loud voice, and I was telling him everything I was going to do. because my job at that moment was to survive so I could get home to my family. There's not a black man in America that drives down the road and hears a siren by, or a black woman maybe, and hears a siren behind them and their heart rate doesn't jump and their blood pressure doesn't go up. I could be doing the speed limit. And it's going to go up because that fear, that's the PTSD we all have. And we get it at birth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, we get it at birth. We understand that we are different and we're going to be treated different and everything's different for us. So when you feel that way, it's a generation. And think about it. White people, you had a 400-year head start.
Well, do you think that reading books like White Fragility and those kinds of literature, for example, are helpful in educating us? Is that a first step? I think, as I said when we started out, we protested. We're starting to have conversation, which is great. I'm a person of action. I want to do something, right? I just want to do something, right? But what are those things we need to be looking at? And here's another question for all of you. So I know there's been the 8 can't wait, lists of, we're handing the police departments and we're talking about addressing police brutality. Well, that's great. But my question is this: do we think that to some degree that is just a Band-Aid fix over the gaping wound of things like systemic poverty, the systemic racist philosophy, those things? So address that, Denise.
But what you can do, you're doing. It's not even, it is facing it. It's naming it for what it is, and then educating the people around you about what it is, specifically the white people around you who live their life. That's why I said white privilege is the foundation of racism, because I was at dinner last night, and not only were people hanging out with no mask on, they were it was like, they were oblivious to the circumstances that were going on in our world today. And quite frankly, Angie, you're running for office. We need more people like you who are, and it's not even open, who's willing to face the tough conversations and go, guess what? I accept the fact that my privilege has made me blind to what your experience might be. I mean, when Frederick talks about your heart racing, that's a stress. You wonder why Black people die earlier, specifically Black men? Because they have to deal with that from day one. So you, as a politician, it's important for politicians to not shy away from these deep conversations. And the one that you really can't shy away from is turning to your white counterpart or to your white minister or to your white husband and say, all right, within our family, where are we supporting and perpetuating racism and white privilege? Someone said to me, well, I can't help growing up white, I'm white. And that's what I used to say when I was I can't help I'm Black, but I deserve this job, but I can't help I'm Black. We can't help it, but we can change our mindset. And it starts, I believe, white people have got to do this work. We know what to do. We read the books. We know what to do. You got to read the books. But more than anything, politically speaking and on a community level, white people have got to have conversations with each other. There's no reason for a Black man to be in his own neighborhood and be arrested by a cop. Come on.
So, okay, this is going to be a really stupid question, and I'll start with you, Dave, but I'm not sure I know what conversation to have with my white friends without I need to call one of you to help me.
No, you don't. You just gotta gut it out. And
okay,
I want to have a serious conversation And it's going to be about, boom, this is it. And give me a couple of minutes. Let's have a little dialogue. I mean, easier said than done, but that's what you have to do. Has to be blunt. Has to be straight on.
Okay. So the conversation, education, what else? Frederick, do you have another idea?
I think here's it is. And I'm going to ask this to every white person, and you don't answer it. I want you to think about it. What are you willing to lose to help someone else? Because if you help another race, a black person, let's go with black people, you may lose some friends, you may lose some status. Are you willing to lose it for the betterment of humanity? And if you're not, then step aside. But
Okay.
that's what we need. We need more people who are willing to lose something. Because in the end, we all remember the heroes who did those things.
Mhm.
We remember them, maybe long after they're gone and dead, but we remember them because they had the courage to stand up and go, I'm willing to lose some status, some money, a job, because this is wrong. And I'm going to steal the crime model. See something, say something. If you see something wrong that's being done to a black person, say it, call it out. Don't sit there and go, well, it's not about me. I'm good. I got my job. Man, Johnny, it was nice knowing you, but I got to pay my own bills. Sometimes we have to sacrifice. What are you willing to lose? And I think that's
Okay. Okay. I know we have some questions. Gavin, would you like to share those questions that the audience have sent in?
Yeah. So we have a few questions. I've tried to pick out a couple. One of the ones that I thought that we haven't really talked about, so I'm gonna kind of jump it up a bit first. This person said, I've heard some of my African American friends talk about microaggressions, but I'm not sure what they mean by that. Every time I look up microaggressions on Google or try to learn about it, I get conflicting ideas and sources. So what is a microaggression to the panel?
The aforementioned double clutching of a purse when you get in an elevator. One time I went to do a remote broadcast. My name was misspelled on the marquee. I said something to the guy, the owner of this place, where a restaurant where we were going to do the show. And I said, hey, you got two M's in there. The Giants quarterback Phil Simms uses two M's in his name. He says, heck, we thought you were white. Stuff like that. I mean, we could probably, Denise, Frederick, I'm sure, that list, we could be here all night. But, I can think of my kids being, followed in stores, you being followed in stores. Assumptions. I know one. Oh, you're so articulate. Don't ever say that to a person. Don't ever
my
freaking
gosh.
say that. You're so articulate.
Yeah.
Boy, you dress so well.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm a major league broadcaster. What the hell you think I'm going to be doing, okay? Microaggressions. How about even in Manhattan? I could be out in a suit. I could, look like $1 million. Cab. The fifth one may stop and pick me up. Those are a couple of highlights. Frederick, Denise?
Well, you can think about it. How about you're going to buy a home? If you get that far, you're going to buy a home and you can't get it for some reason. And because they can't say because you're black. Can't say that.
But they make up a lot of reasons.
There's other reasons. Oh, you didn't.
It's out of your range.
That doesn't. Because they can't, by law, they're not supposed to say that. But they find ways around, especially if you're trying to move into a neighborhood that they don't want you to be in. That's one thing. Or try being a black woman and getting passionate. Now, for everybody else, it's passionate. For me, it's an angry black woman.
Boom. Thank you very much.
Why do I have to be an angry black woman? I had somebody just the other day say, well, I don't understand why you're angry. I said, I'm not angry. I am just trying to express my feelings.
You're invested.
Yes, yes, I'm passionate. I feel, I am invested. It doesn't mean, so I have to be really nice. I mean, why do I have to be nice? Why can't I just be real?
Like they always say that in sports too. If the black guy does what you're talking about, he's just angry and bitter. But boy, what a hustler! It's a white guy. Oh, he's a gritty, gutty kind of guy. Come on, dog whistle. That is a freaking dog whistle.
And if you think about it, I'm going to give you a little secret here because everyone, you want to know how to face, you want to understand, right? I give you credit, Angie. I really do. You want to know why Black women are so strong. I mean, that's another microaggression, You're
Yes.
so strong. Well, you want to know why? During slavery, our husbands were taken away from us. Our children were taken away from us. And we had to fight like hell. Both things, male and female, pick the cotton, nurse the babies, nurse your babies.
Cook the food.
Cook the food, all of that.
No.
I think I deserve to be angry. If I'm not angry, there's a problem. But see, we learned not to be angry because we had to be accepted. So if I'm
So do you think that?
Don't blame me.
So do you think that not being allowed to be angry has made it worse?
Of course, not being allowed to be yourself makes it worse.
Yeah.
Not being accepted and valued. Someone said last night, it's the whole thing about not valuing Black people, that they were just brought here to do the work. And so thank you very much, now go home. That mentality is still there.
Wow.
Hispanics
Wow.
more of that now.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. Gavin, another question?
Yeah, we have quite a few. The next one, which I think is another one that it wasn't touched on, is how do y'all feel about reparations and what does that mean to you? Is that just like a cash payment or is that policy changes? What does reparations actually mean to you?
I think I'll start. We talk about this about every other day in my house. I don't think it should be cash. Personally, I think education is the key. I think if you're going to do something, it has to be in an education subsidy. It has to be where, because remember, like I said, white people had a 400-year head start. There is no amount of money that's going to wipe away a debt of 400 years. There's not enough zeros on the calculator. So I think it has to be in generational things. So, and when you get education, you build wealth. So I think you have to have the education where Black people get maybe 5 years of school for free, college for free, or something along those lines that we're gonna try to level the playing field. So at least we have an edge up in the education. So when we do put like-minded people or people who are more for humanity like you, Angie, who want to do the right thing in the positions, they will look at a person's application and look at everything that's on an application and not look at who's in front of them, but look at what their qualifications are. So I think if we level the qualifications by education, I think that's the reparation we need. Financial, because guess what? That money that we're going to get, we're just going to give it back to white people because you guys own mostly everything. So
Good point.
it's not like it's going to give us any wealth in the long run. It's going to give you more wealth.
Dave?
Yeah, I think that's a solid proposition Frederick just presented. It's a little scary for me to think of all these people, a whole bunch of Black people, is it 13, 14 million people getting $175,000, and it might be a small percentage of people that wouldn't buy 5 cars and 2 big houses. I hate to say that, but I like the investment that Frederick's talking about in education, because I think that's in terms of functionality and opportunity, it would just be outstanding, and it would lift the burden off of so many people. And I think, and then now you're talking about what we talked about earlier. Not everybody's going to be LeBron James, but there's so many broad fields to choose from, and Black people, we're not necessarily a monolithic group. So, let's go out there, find what intrigues you, what interests you, and attack it and go after it. And I agree with Frederick in terms of education. I think that would be tremendous.
And then I think put it back on, what do you think? would be good reparation? Because you're the one in power.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think would be fair? Any place to start. Not that I'm thinking that Fredericks is wrong, because I like that. So we just gave you a nice example. Now, what would you do if you had been under this kind of thumb all of your life, going back generations? Frederick just told you about how a mindset goes back generation. So if you had to take this mindset back in generations of your family, what would you do to make that person whole? And you can start looking at what happened for the Jews in Germany. Take a look at that. Start there. Do the research. And then you come to the table with ideas. Why do Black people always have to give the ideas?
I know what I would do. However, for sure. Yeah. What else, Gavin?
So this next one is actually a really interesting one. I've heard several conservative lawmakers, politicians, you name it, say that things like redlining, police brutality, and things don't exist because it's illegal. What is your response to that?
I just laughed. That should cover me. That's my answer. Ha ha.
Do we have to respond?
I'm just sharing the question.
No, we're not killing the messenger, but I mean, come on.
The next one that we have is, I suspect that there are some white people who don't feel very privileged. So how do we address that? The label of white privilege might be a bit inflammatory.
Well, it is inflammatory, and I'm not going to excuse myself because of that. It is inflammatory, and the reason it's inflammatory is because people don't want to look at it. They don't want to accept it. They don't want to feel a part of it because, one of the things that we get, and I'm just being real, one of the things that we get is, well, my foreparents didn't have slaves. My analogy is, okay, I get that, but there's a bathtub. The bathtub has water in it, and you're in it. You're wet. That's it. That's the analogy. The analogy is, and this is vulnerable for me because normally Black folks don't want to hurt your feelings when you start to say stuff like that. It gets inflammatory, and it's not inflammatory. It's just real. It's
Hurt
just
my
honest.
feelings.
It's not saying privilege, white privilege has nothing to do with, well, I shouldn't say nothing,
Right.
But it's not about how much money you have. It's about, did you wake up with an advantage?
Mm-hmm.
And in America, the color of a white skin has an advantage. It does have also the ability to give you power, no matter how much money you make. As a white person, it gives you the advantage of having power over Black people. That's why you're seeing Black men being killed. That's why you're seeing it. And, a knee on the neck and facing the camera as if, I'm not going to get in trouble for this because I'm white. Come on. That's what it means, white privilege. It can change. It can change.
I read this somewhere, and I can't remember where, that, white people are always saying, oh, those Black people just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps like I did. And someone else in this conversation said, what bootstraps? Which is the truth. That's what you're saying, right? You don't have the bootstraps given to you in the first place.
Well, even if we have, that's what we keep saying here. That's what Frederick said. We have to polish our shoes twice as bright. We have to learn twice as hard. We have to, and of course you're going to see the spectrum because some people are just going to give in to the fact that they can't overcome it. That's just the nature of the beast. That's true of any race. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is that we are raised, our parents have raised us to be better. And that's the thing that I think that sometimes the general white American population doesn't understand, how hard our parents work to make us, viable, contributing people in society. Yet we walk out the front door and we don't have guarantees that we're going to come back at night, because somebody may have decided, well, you know, your life is not as valuable, so I can take it.
I put it in sports terms. A lot of times I walk out the door, walking up or down the street, and it's like I'm on kickoff coverage. Got to be 360 swivel. Got to watch. Somebody's going to try to watch out for that blind side hit.
Yes.
And I think I try to keep. I don't know. I guess I do it so much now. I didn't even have to think. It's an automatic response.
And privilege means you never have to have that conversation 10 and 2. Never, ever, ever.
I confess, you're right.
You never have to have it.
it's
You never have to have it.
You know, I've heard from young white guys. One guy told me a story about he was riding with a black friend who was driving, and the guy was going a little bit over the speed limit. Cops pull him over. The cop's got his hand on the gun. He said, and this white kid said, I got pulled over one time, and I was like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Hey, let me see your license registration. It was very cordial. There was no tension. There was no, as Frederick talked about, it wasn't, an overactive heartbeat or anything. And it turned out the white kid got let go. But, the black kid gets pulled over, and the two cops come up with their hands on the gun, holsters unstrapped. I mean, come on, man.
I think when it comes to white privilege, the person that made that comment, I think if you don't see it, I think they're looking for the big picture. They're looking for the home run. I'm going to say it like this. Think of sentencing guidelines and how people are sentenced in the court of law. That's white privilege. When a black person is going to get more time for a crime than a white person, that's white privilege right there. That's not something you see every day unless you're involved in it. But you get it and don't even know you're getting it because it's just there. It's natural. It's the everyday. And to go back to your analogy about the bootstraps, we don't even have the boots on. We're still wearing flip-flops. So how can we pull up straps that we don't even have the boots? Think about it. Black people in this country, in theory, have only been free since about 1970.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when the Voting Rights Act of 1965 happened. So give a couple years for it to enact itself. So 50 years. Like literally, we've been truly free for 50 years. We are, and I hate to say this, black people are right where white people want us to be. We're right where we're supposed to be. 50 years, think about it. 50 years is not that long. We're right where we're supposed to be. So the privilege they have to be willing to give up a little bit to gain a whole lot.
Okay.
I'll say that we do have 2 other audience questions, but I know we are 5 minutes over the scheduled time, so I don't want to keep anyone after. But if y'all want, I can ask the questions, but I'll leave that up to y'all. Okay, cool.
Yes.
So the next one, this is kind of a comment and question, kind of wrapped into one. Soon after the George Floyd killing, a video circulated of Candace Owens claiming that George Floyd was a criminal. For those that don't know, Candace Owens is a very conservative commentator who constantly talks bad things about Black people. As other Black members of society, how do we respond as white people when we know she's wrong, but we also don't want to seem like we have the white savior complex?
Oh, white savior complex. I've never heard that one before.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, I've never heard that. I had a friend of mine. I mean, it depends upon how vulnerable I really want to be in answering this, because
Go for it, Denise.
Go way back on that one. On the plantation, there was always this guy called Uncle Tom. And his job was to make sure everything was right for the massa. Everything. And what happened is he served the master, he lied for the master, he aligned with the master, he did all the things. He beat other Black slaves for the master. He did all that work. Now, this might get out there and this woman might get mad at me. So I'm very vulnerable at the moment. But I had a friend of mine ask me to comment about her, and I said, no, I'm not going to dignify. I'm not going to do it. Because first, to have someone of your own race. I mean, why did it matter if this man took drugs or his life didn't need to be taken by someone else? Let the system deal with that. And we already know what the system probably would have done. He would have gotten a bigger sentence than a white guy who had done it. But I didn't want to speak to it because it brought up too much pain of how our own people turned in or brought up the most negative aspects of our culture in order to gain favor for themselves. That's what an Uncle Tom means, that he was in the house, so he got to live in the house, but let me tell you, he still got the scraps from the table. He didn't get the full-fledged dinner on the table. He got the scraps. He got better scraps, but he got scraps. And just to hear that, it pained me to my heart. And number two, it pained me to my heart that it was someone of my culture. And it pained me to my heart because my friend who was trying to understand wanted me to comment on it. She didn't understand how much trauma that conversation was having for me, that I was having because of it. So I have no real answer to that question. I just want people to know how it's just, I said to her, she was Jewish, I said, how would you feel if you were interviewing a Jew that had turned against his people and gone on the side of Hitler? How would that feel to you? How would it feel to be betrayed or to feel, maybe that's not a betrayal in some people's eyesight, but it felt like a betrayal to me, and I matter. My feelings matter. You know, that trauma is deep inside because we've seen ourselves sold out so many times.
I'm not even going to mention the woman's name. I thought her comments were ridiculous, uncalled for, despicable, and I could go on. It doesn't matter. I don't know what the man's record may or may not have been, but he did not deserve that ultimate fate.
Right.
And it was an inhumane act, and what she did is almost corresponding with what happened on the street in Minneapolis. Come on.
Actually, I have a comment about Candace Owen, and it's not one, as Mr. Dave and Mr. Denise have said. It comes from a different angle. If anybody's read the book, The Willie Lynch Letters, The Making of a Slave, she is a character right out of those 28 pages, even though it's not a true book. Think about it. In the book, it says the black woman would watch her husband be destroyed by the white master, and then she would cozy up to the white master to gain favor. And then she would teach the young boy not to do bad things because he would get beat like his father. And she would teach her daughter to cozy up to master for favor. That's Candace Owens. She's cozying up to the master for favor. She's a character right out of the Willie Lynch Letters, The Making of a Slave. So in a way, she's misguided. I feel sorry for her because whoever or wherever her turn in life happened, someone messed her up and made her believe in order to get ahead, she had to reduce herself.
Exactly.
So I feel sorry for her.
Yeah. Well, I send love and support and bless her too. That's why I said it hurt in my heart to even have to comment. Because as a mother, I would want to put my arms around and say, baby, you don't have to do that in order to gain favor. It's not necessary. But people can do the things they want to do, but it's not necessary.
Okay, one last question.
Yeah, and I'm going to reframe it just a little bit because I think it would be better framed this way. So for a lot of moderate and even conservative white folks, there's the general perception that African Americans are criminals, and if they're not criminals, they're on welfare services. How do we correct that line of thinking, even because we know it's ignorant?
Go meet some black people. Get out from under your bubble, and go to places, organizations. Step outside your comfort zone. There's plenty of places to meet a broad spectrum of black people. We cover a wide range And just like you have your deadbeats and you have your criminals, we have our judges, doctors, lawyers, people in tech, education, broadcasting. Get your ass out of the house and start looking for them and start asking around.
Yeah, because look at this panel. You know, I'll tell this story to kind of answer this, and it's a quick story. I had a girlfriend, and these are things when don't take offense when you're having these conversations with your white friends, don't at all. But anyway, I had a white friend call me and she sent me a text and she's like, "Did you see Becoming?" And I love Michelle Obama. She's wonderful. I think she's a wonderful, beautiful person. So don't take it wrong. But my first thought was, now why you call me and ask me if I saw it? Did you see it? Is the question. And then the second thing is Michelle Obama's upbringing was no different than mine. Her father sitting in that easy chair was my father sitting in the easy chair. Her going to that school and the way her parents stayed after her is the same upbringing that I had. It was a mirror of how I grew up and how thousands of Black Americans grew up. She's not some kind of, woo, she is, but she's not. I mean,
she's not one single person from another planet. She embodies millions of other people.
Millions of other African-American women and families. Because that's how we were raised. We were raised, I mean, not all of us had that advantage to be raised like that, but many of us were like that. So it's like you have to stop looking through the lens of Black people are criminals and, you know, they're ignorant. And because we've been sitting here telling you tonight that that's not true. If given the same opportunity, the same educational things, the same opportunities with education mixed in, you'd see brilliance growing. Brilliance, because we have had to do it harder. And quite frankly, for all the ignorance that can be built into the DNA, so is brilliance, so is magnificence. And our DNA, it's bred into us to be twice this, twice that. It's there. We just need the opportunity. So reparations to me is give a brother a job that you were going to give to a white guy. Give a sister a job that you were going to give to a white woman, because we can handle it, and take away the stigma that we're some people who can't do anything or that we just would rather be on drugs, because it's not true.
I think we got to change the language. First of all, when Black people get it, it's called welfare. When white people get it, it's called subsidies. So let's change the language. All right, first there, right there. Once you start that, then you can move forward. There are more, if you look at the statistics, there are more Caucasians on public assistance than Black people in this country. So but it comes all from the place of discomfort, being uncomfortable in the media and how we're portrayed in the media. You know, look at the news, look at the evening news. When I tell my 9-year-old, I say, hey, watch. When it comes, I say, watch. When it's an article about a Black person committing a crime, they show the Black person's mugshot or face. Normally when it's a white person, they show a scene. They don't show the person. It's all how we're portrayed. So and I understand the media is the fourth state. And the media is going to portray us in a way, and we allow ourselves, because we're not in a position of power, to change that. But, we are. Montgomery bus boycott. Over 300 some odd days, they didn't ride the bus, and guess what happened? Bus company caved in. We, as Black people, also have to be uncomfortable and willing to sacrifice things and go, you know what? I'm not gonna buy that. I'm not gonna go down there. I'm not gonna do this. I'm not going to do it, and I'm going to sacrifice. I guarantee you. You know, there's a joke in the Black community. You want to change gun laws, have a whole bunch of Black people go buy guns.
And show up in a state court, state house,
We'll have gun reform the next day.
Within hours.
Thank you.
Within hours.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. Well, you guys have been wonderful. That's why I love you all. I knew this would be a terrific conversation. I'm so grateful to have you all as my personal friend. So I just want to leave everyone with one other thought. As you can tell, I'm a big Stacey Abrams fan, I guess, but recently she had an op-ed piece in the New York Times, and I can't remember the exact title, but it was something like, saying we need to vote seems so inadequate right now. But the truth of the matter is, all of us can do that one thing. Your vote is your power. And as she said recently, vote like your life depends on it, because trust me, it does. And vote all the way down the ballot in every place. And don't make an excuse not to vote. It is so important,
I
especially
look
now.
forward to filling out my mail-in ballot all the way down. Top to bottom.
Good for you. I wish you had mine.
Congratulations to you, Angie, because the bottom line is we need more leaders, more politicians like you who are willing to face the hard things, who are willing to bring people together as opposed to dividing them. And starting with hard conversations is where you bring people together, where you get vulnerable together, you have an experience, you cry together, you laugh together, you argue together, but you get to the other side. And so bravo to you for being so courageous to do this, because you could lose favor by doing this.
You know what? This was easy for me because I feel very compelled to have these conversations, and I'm very lucky that I know so many wonderful people. And so I'm just really very fortunate in that regard. So thank you all for being my guest. You all are difference makers every single day. I respect what you do, Frederick, what you do, Dave. You make a difference. Denise, you are always in my heart too. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. Keep in touch.
Good luck. I hope you win. I hope you win in a rout. I hope you blow them out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, you guys, take care.
Take care, everybody.
Safe.
Hey, Frederick,
Thanks.
Denise,
Thank
nice
you.
to meet you. I hope to see you down the road.
Okay.
Take care. Be well.
For sure.